Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Graduate Journey. Today we have Sarvesh joining us, and yeah, let's just dive straight into it. So we'll just have a short rapid fire introduction so that our viewers get to know you a little bit more and your background, etc. So can you just tell us about your high school and the board of your high school?
So hi everyone, my name is Sarvesh. I went high school in Bangalore in the International School Bangalore, and I did the IB there.
Okay, cool. And so your current college and year of graduation?
I go to Brown University in the US, and I'm graduating May 2025.
Okay, cool. And so what are you majoring right now at Brown?
So my major is biochemistry and molecular biology. We call them concentrations here, but it's basically the same thing. Yeah.
What were some of the other colleges that you applied to?
I mean, I applied to 15 because that was the limit like we had in school. I applied to a bunch. I applied to Cornell and Princeton. Those were the other Ivies. I applied to Stanford, MIT. I feel like it was a lot of reaches. If I didn't get into Brown, I would have gone to Vanderbilt. But yeah, and then I applied to a bunch of UCs as well.
Right, so apart from the US, did you apply to any other countries? Or?
Yeah, so I did apply to the UK as well, but it was really more of like I knew I didn't want to go there. I was mostly like, planning to come here. But it was sort of more of like a just in case.
Great. And so I think we just dive into the academic section. How challenging was school for you? And especially with the IBDP, is renowned to be very rigorous and grueling. And so
Mhm.
what systems did you use to actually ace the IB? And I'm assuming the SB, so IG as well.
Looking back, the IB was like challenging even in the context of like college and stuff. And the subjects that you do at HL level and IB do give you placement credit, at least at the college level. So they're very much, like introductory college level classes that you're taking, even if you're doing like A levels, for instance. And to be honest, CBSE and ICSE, but unfortunately, like they don't get as much like recognition in the US. It was pretty challenging, of course, and I feel like having that sort of like well-rounded, it was not just like technical information, right? Like you also had the IAs, you also had the EE. So I feel like the sort
Right.
of like research skills that gives you, I feel like it's pretty unique to the IB particularly, and I feel like that's really helped me in college in terms of my just assignments, like anything to do with, research. I feel like it's really helped me develop that sort of intuition. So I'd say like that was honestly my main like takeaway from IB, but also just yeah, just managing time because college is honestly it's a lot of self-motivation. No one's here to um push you and like force you to do things. It's honestly as much like how much ever you take it to be. So I feel like doing the IB really helped me with that. But in terms of acing the IB itself, honestly, I feel like at least the ISB gives you like a fairly good framework within which to work, right? Like in the sense that I feel like all our deadlines were like pretty early. So, we had like multiple drafts of everything, which in that moment obviously seemed like a little annoying, but in hindsight, I feel like that was really useful. And it like teaches you to work in a way that's like that ensures like good results for you in the future, right? So like you were saying, like you had your cast deadline now, which is like why am I having a cast deadline in the
Right.
first of 11th grade? But I feel
Right.
like at the end it all ends up helping because if you try to do the IB, all of it in 12th grade, it's going to be like crazy. So just like past papers, like making sure you know the style of questions, all of that. But I feel like TISB like does a good job of that. So yeah.
Right. And can I just ask, what is your predicted grade and actual grade in IB?
TISB predicts out of 44. No, as I'm sure you know. So my predicted was a 44 and my final was a 45.
Great. And so, did you take any AP courses? Because I know that TISP is openly against it, but then some students still do end up taking it.
Yeah, so I didn't do any AP courses. I felt like the IB was enough I was doing all the subjects that I, really liked. There was not like something that I really wanted to do that I couldn't do in the
Right.
IB. And at the college level, an AP is viewed at the same level as an IB HL
Right.
subject.
Right.
Definitely not going to hurt you, like if an admissions officer sees that you've done 2 or 3 APs outside of your IB subjects, I don't know how much it adds, but it can't hurt. So if you're really into, like ecology or if you're really into CS, then go for it. If there's other things you could be doing with that time that are perhaps like more relevant, you should do the other things. Yeah.
What about standardized testing? So, since you were in the COVID batch, did you still end up giving the SAT or ACT or anything like that, or how did that work?
Yes, so I gave the last SAT before COVID. Like I think school closed on Friday, and then I gave the SAT on that Saturday or something like that. So
Oh,
I did give
wow.
my test
Right.
scores. Yeah, but I feel like it was pretty much an even split, like in our year, like the number of people who submitted test scores and who didn't. I submitted the SAT, my SAT score. Is the test optional policy like still there? Is it still
I think so. Yeah.
So I feel like at this point they're used to evaluating applicants without the SAT score as well. So I feel like the SAT is really it's kind of like a hit or miss sometimes. So if you do give it and you feel like you're not satisfied with your score, like I think you're okay not submitting. So I got a 1570, I got a 800
Okay.
in math and a 770 in English.
Wow, congratulations. Now, just moving on to extracurriculars. So, what were some of the extracurriculars you did that you think made you stand out, especially in the eyes of an Ivy League admissions officer?
So the top activity of mine was like the research. I did like a research program. Second term to like the summer after 11th grade. So that was in environmental chemistry. I did this through this program that like connects you with a professor here, and then like you get to like work on like some aspect of that research with them. So it's not actually directly related to what I study now. But it did give me like a lot of research skills, and I did focus on that part a lot. And I feel like having the environmental aspect of that helped as well, in that it was like rigorous research, but it did have some like very sort of beneficial aspect to it. My project was to do with like heavy metal pollution in the Ganga. So it
Okay.
was close to home as well. So I feel like that was definitely a plus for me. On the activities list, you're supposed to rank like 10 activities or as many as you want, like but maximum 10 in order of, like how much they mean to you. And I feel like people sometimes tend to choose like more showy things and put them on top, as opposed to putting things that they actually consistently did for 4 years. So my second and third activities were actually not that like fancy. Like they were just like I played the violin, I was in the orchestra. I played badminton as well, like pretty consistently. So those two things were like active parts of my life. And even though like I wasn't like some national level champion or something, like I still wanted to highlight that. So I remember like I
Right.
put those
Okay.
two things like, but that's something that like I don't think you should shy away from doing just because they're not necessarily like as much of like,
Right.
an
It
eye
adds like a
catcher.
certain element of authenticity in a way.
For sure, for sure. And the fact that like you do anything, for 4 years consecutively, like consistently, it does say something. So I feel like for sure do those
Right.
things and put those things on there. But yeah, outside of that, I was the social service prefect my year, and I played like a decently big role in Vivum. Like our Vivum was online, which was sad, but yeah, I still played like a decent role in that. We organized this like national like music competition. It was online, but I was pretty proud of it. Like we got submissions from like all over the country, and we had like professional musicians like judging and stuff. Like that was a good experience. But yeah, I definitely feel like COVID changed some of my plans a lot. But to be completely honest, like when I was applying, I wasn't like my extracurriculars were probably the area of my application I was least confident in. I felt like it was something I could have worked on to, sort of like shape it a little better in terms of like, what I was trying to convey.
Right. But I mean, you're still at Brown, so
Yeah, no,
um, yeah. And I was just wondering, did you do your research program through Lumiere, or was that not around that time, or did you do some
it
other?
was it's called Pioneer.
Ah, okay, Pioneer,
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And so, what about social work? So, I know COVID probably did limit a lot of opportunities, but how are you able to showcase that in your
Mm-hmm.
application?
Okay, yeah, I can't believe how I forgot that I forgot this, but teaching, I love teaching. Teaching was a big part of my application. It was what I wrote my essay about, or like my main Common App essay was about that, and it was there like in my activities list as well. Yeah, so this was during my summer after 11th grade as well, but I did make like an English course for factory workers. It's like 8 to 12 week like English course to teach spoken English to people so that they're better able to like communicate, and just so that like they're able to advance in their jobs, because I feel like speaking English is like a fairly important skill. I
So
went like
about your teaching programs, um I just want to know what is the scale of that like, because I know some students do have some misconception that, oh, maybe your social project has to help the entire country, for example, or something like that. So I just wanted to have get some context for
Yes.
viewers.
Yes, no, I'm glad you brought that up because that is not the case. Mine was like I was teaching 20 people, it was not that much, 20, like in the sense that I would be like on YouTube all the time looking at like, what people do to get into college, and they would be doing like insane things and getting like awards from the government and, I don't know, all kinds of crazy things. And it would just be a little
Right.
overwhelming. I do believe it's possible to navigate the college experience without feeling the pressure of having to do something like that. So you don't need to do something that's affecting 50,000 people because it's hard to actually affect 50,000 people at that age. And
Right.
the application process also values smaller scale things, but that still did have like a meaningful impact on a number of people.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I mean, yeah, we are creating these videos so people can get inspired about what
Mhm.
successful students did. But at the same time, I don't want it to get overwhelming, for example, or just people think that, oh, it's like too much, or it's like I can't do this or something like that. Just moving on to the next question. So, did you do any internships in summers? Was research just taking most of your time, or how'd that work?
Yeah, so the summer after my 10th grade, so this is before I started the IB, I did like an internship at a pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
Where it was mostly shadowing, honestly. It wasn't much like wet lab work or like, yeah, I wasn't doing too much work in the lab. But it just sort of like helped me see how the whole process works and what the industry is like for the field that I'm interested in. And it's definitely something that I'd still
Right.
like. Design and pharmaceuticals is still something that I'm looking at. The summer after 10th, I went on like this Spiti Valley expedition that like TSV takes you on like every year. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. But it's basically like you go into the mountains like in Himachal Pradesh, and then you do some social work, and then you also like hike. So that's what I did for like the first part of my summer, and then I was doing this internship for like a month after that. But that was the summer after my 10th grade.
Right. And so how do you actually manage to get this internship? Was it just through connections, or was there any
Mhm.
sort of portal or like platform that you used, or
No, no, it was my dad's friends thing.
right,
So
okay.
it was basically just connections. I feel like the I tried to email like one like company like to see if they had like an internship thing or something, and they never got back to me. And I feel like that's usually how it is. It's hard to find companies in India which have like a streamlined process for high school internship.
And finally, just to wrap up the section, what did your awards or prizes, competitions, and like honors essentially look like?
Nothing too big, I did a bunch of MUNs. I got some awards there. I think I put that in there, and then I had like my music certifications for like
Right.
violin. I think I put that in there as well. But the awards and honors section is designed keeping the American school system in mind. There's a lot more like opportunity to get these awards and honors. Like honors, I think is like an idea that's very common here. Even generally like things that people were putting on there were like, oh, maybe if they got like IGCSE like world topper in like ad math or something like that, then they would like put that there. But it isn't as streamlined of a process as it is here. So I'd say like let that not like cause too much pressure.
And so just finally, just the last section would be about your essays and just the application process in general. What was the application like, a process like as a
Mhm.
whole for you? So were TSP counselors enough, or did you enlist external counselors, or how do you navigate through the entire, or do you not have a counselor? Like, how do you navigate through it?
Yeah, I didn't have an external counselor. I just used like TISV's resources. So I was assigned a counselor that was like we had Miss Priya, right, who's the head college counselor,
Right.
and then we were assigned to like another counselor. I felt like that was enough for me, the assistance that required for the application, and I also didn't want to have like too many voices weighing in that weren't mine. Like I wanted like a certain amount of control over my application. So I feel like going into it, I just even in the 10th grade, I sort of decided that like I don't necessarily want external help like with my application.
Right.
Now I don't know if that's like, I wouldn't advise directly for or directly against having an external counselor because I know having one worked well for a lot of people. It gives you it definitely like having that fresh perspective and like that experience like perspective, and that like one-on-one attention does help. So I know a lot of people who benefited from that.
Okay, cool. And so what led you to pick Brown specifically over other like you mentioned Vanderbilt and any other colleges you applied to?
Choosing Brown, I chose to apply here over a lot of other colleges because I heard that the culture here was very down to earth and it was very much like, you're learning for the sake of learning, and it was a very like sort of it just seemed like a nice place to be. If that makes
Okay.
any sense, like in this as in like it seemed like low stakes, like but people are like genuinely motivated here. It isn't like cutthroat or competitive or anything like that. That was very much the impression I got before I applied, and it has like the reputation of being like the quirky Ivy. Like, but I mean, quirky is like an overused word these days. But
Right.
but basically, it had that vibe.
And so
Yeah,
how
and
has your impression of Brown changed after you actually got spent a
oh,
year
it's
to
it's
there?
not I mean, like I all of those things that I thought would be true are true. And
Right.
I love it here. I'm having a great time, and I feel like something that also stood out to me was like the academic flexibility that I feel like generally colleges in the US give you a lot more than colleges elsewhere. My intended major was biochemistry, and I'm still doing that. But at the same time, I'm someone who loves studying other things and sort of also needs to study other things. So every semester here, I I make sure to take a humanities course, regardless of what I'm doing with my major. Having that freedom is something I really, really value. And Brown has this thing called the open curriculum, where you basically do not have any core requirements outside of your major. So you're basically free to take anything you want. So you can structure your sort of education however you want. And I feel like having the responsibility was quite exciting for me when I was applying, and I spoke about it like in my essays and stuff as well.
Great. And so what about letters of recommendations? How do you go about choosing who to submit, who to ask from, and how many to submit, etc.?
Honestly, I feel like letters of recommendation are potentially like more important than people think they are. They're extremely, I feel like from an admissions officer point of view, I've heard them say that it's really important. I can see why as well, because I mean, it gives them a sort of an account of you that's entirely not yours, or at least in theory, entirely not yours. And I feel like that really helps them see how you would fit in an academic setting and stuff like that. Hearing really good things about you from somebody else is always a plus. So I feel like
Right,
choose
right.
choose your recommender as well. Brown allows you to submit three recommendations. Usually it's two or three. I submitted from my biology teacher, my chemistry teacher, and my history teacher. So I was actually in TSB for a really long time. I joined in the fifth grade, and my history teacher in IB actually taught me every single year from sixth grade. So she taught me for
Oh,
7 years.
wow.
So she knew me quite well. She literally had seen me grow up. So I feel like I was very fortunate to be able to get a recommendation from someone like that. I feel like that hopefully reflected well on me. And then biology and chemistry, of course, they were like relevant to my major and like what I wanted to study. And I definitely did have a good rapport with like those teachers as well, even if they taught me for like a much shorter period of time. But I feel like yeah, it can be tricky thinking about, like how to build a good relationship, especially if it's just a 2 year period of time. But also, even if they say one unique thing about you in the recommendation, that's enough for it to like stand out.
Right.
Because
That makes sense.
because I feel like the bulk of most recommendations are the same. Just one anecdote that maybe that this teacher didn't write for anybody else. I feel like that's enough. Like, because those are the margins, right? At this level, those are the margins. So I feel like even something as small as that can affect your application in a really positive way. So yeah, don't pressurize yourself too much thinking about like, oh, how am I going to build a good relationship with? But it's more like just be your like authentic self, ask questions, show that you're interested.
I'll say about the essays. So, how are
Mhm.
you able to differentiate yourself? And do you have any advice for students when to start writing them? Out of like so many different ideas or so many different prompts, what to pick because it can get
Mhm.
overwhelming at
Yeah.
times. So,
For sure, for sure. Like I remember I had this oh sorry. Also I had a recommendation from my like a research professor. Like as like
okay.
an so Common App does allow you to submit like external recommendations, and each school has like a limit on how many. You can submit one or two or whatever. But I did have a recommendation from them as well outside of my
And
academic.
so, since you did work with them for a sustained period of time, like at least a year and a half, I think that's what. or a
Oh,
year?
no, 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 no. This was like maybe 5 months, 4 to 5 months. This was just
Ah, okay.
second term of 11th grade leading into the summer. So it was,
Ah,
yeah,
oh,
four.
oh, okay, okay, got it.
No, to go back to the essay thing. Yeah, I remember, especially like I feel like a lot of the Ivies and colleges at that level have a lot of supplements. Of course, like some of them overlap for sure. But there's also some really niche ones, you know. So um like I said earlier, like look at them even as early as like the second term of 11th grade, you know, think about what those things mean to you. I feel like a good essay can do so much for you for your application. It's where they see you as a person, and I feel like good writing is really really valued. Yeah, so just actively have that in your mind, and you never know when a good idea is going to strike you. Don't be afraid to bring out like personal sides of you, you know, like there's very limited space, so use that space to show as many parts of your personality as you can. Say don't like leave things to the last minute, because last minute, like if you're looking at like, oh, describe one quirk of yours or something, and then you're like, oh, I don't know what quirks I have, but then you know you have quirks. So it's like, yeah, just actively think about it. That's probably my
Right, and so something like common, I believe, start writing it in the summer of 11th and 12th.
September, honestly, August or September. But funny story, like 8 or 9 days before RD application. So this is like the last week of December. So I applied to U Chicago Early Action, um, not ED. I applied to
Right.
U Chicago EA, right, which is like not binding. And I got deferred, and that was my first college decision, and I like freaked out. I was like, oh my God, I've gotten deferred. Like this is not looking good for me. And I like had a meeting with Miss Priya, and Miss Priya read my Common App, and she's like, beta, I think you need to like change this. It's like, I think your essay maybe is not the best that it could be, or you should look at changing it because it doesn't convey as much of, you know, your personality as it should. So I had to change my essay with basically 1 week left, you know. So that was a bit of a um experience for me. But yeah, so the final essay that went out to all my RD colleges, I wrote 1 week before the deadline. So all this kind of chaos ends up happening. Be
Mm-hmm.
ready for it. But
Right. I think probably the last question was that if you had to go back to your high school self and give yourself some advice or to students in your position,
mhm.
what advice would that be?
At times I feel like I would be overwhelmed by the fact that one decision is going to affect the next 4 years of my life, right? So in the March of 12th grade, I had no idea where I was going. And then in the April, I suddenly knew I was coming to Providence, Rhode Island, and I would be here for the rest, like 4 years, next 4 years of my life. It's a big decision, right? In that, like, if I had chosen to go to Vanderbilt instead, my life would be like quite different. You know, it's located in a very different part of this country, and everything would have been that much more different. But I feel like as uncertain as this process is, it's designed in a way that you'll always come out of it having gained a lot, right? And ultimately the a lot of it is making the most of what you have and what you get. And like I said, MIT was my dream school. And Brown was not even one of my top three. I mean, I was aiming like really high. Like I said, I love it here. I can't imagine myself being anywhere else. And I feel like that's a fairly common sentiment, like I'm not like gutted that I didn't get into MIT or anything like that. So it's okay. Like if you don't get into your dream school, it's fine. And I feel like we're just incredibly privileged to be able to access this level of education. It's not the end of the world if your expected outcomes don't end up happening. And don't, like I said, don't stress yourself too much. You don't need to be some national hero. Do as much as you can do. Be as genuine as you can. Just because I would stress, I would have these moments where I'm like, I'm
Right.
really not enough, and this has like a bearing on my future and all of this stuff. But it doesn't matter as much as you think it does. And if I'd gone somewhere else, I would have felt like I couldn't have been happier elsewhere. There's always something more to do. So
Right,
it's
right.
that you end up going somewhere where you're like, oh, I'm just like not motivated, and like there's just nothing to do here.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course.